Hello, all you amazing beings out there. We are MindFeelz, and today we're going to be talking about forgiveness, which is a really good topic.
Forgiveness. To start, forgiveness is oftentimes about what we need, right? So forgiveness is about trying to get ourselves to that place of acceptance and surrender and allowing ourselves to let go of experiences or hurts or sufferings or pains that we've received along the way. Sometimes I think forgiveness is put on maybe the other person or the experience, where we think that we have to get something from the other person or from the experience. And I would like to really get into how it's about letting go of the situation or the experience or what caused us the pain, so that we can move on with our lives, so that we don't see those things come back into our lives, so that we don't harness anger or frustration, so that we don't get triggered in certain situations that are similar, and we're able to go into the world with this fresh palette. So that's kind of where I want to start the talk.
Yeah.
How do you feel about it?
Yes.
She's in.
Number one, I agree. Well, I think, it's important to make note of that when it comes to forgiveness. Sometimes there's this misconception that if you forgive someone, perhaps you're giving them permission, or you're condoning whatever the behavior is. So you kind of withhold that forgiveness because you feel like you don't want to be permitting and letting things slide. But ultimately, you're right, all that does is keep you stuck in a place where you're still experiencing the thing that hurt you over and over again, because you're living either in fear of wanting to prevent it, or you're still holding on to some of the memories and the pain that is associated with whatever the thing was that needs to be forgiven, wherever the brokenness is, wherever the trespass is. And that really, it's for you, and it might not change anything about the person on the other end of it, but ultimately it changes so much within yourself. And it's releasing and forgiving someone might not even always happen with words so explicitly. And you mentioning that it doesn't necessarily have to be this big, huge exchange with somebody where you announce your forgiveness. It's really an action within ourselves, and something we practice, and a process we submit to. When we decide we're going to submit to this process of letting go of something painful, and if the person's going to stay in our lives, it looks a little different. If the person isn't, because they're still acting in the same pattern or behavior, and you can't have that in your life, but you still have to forgive and let go of your association with that.
Or what if, I think this is a good way of looking at it, is if that person is not alive anymore, let's say, or that situation is long gone to where you can't get that reciprocation of I hear you, you forgive me, I'm sorry. I guess maybe that's what we're looking for a lot of times, is like an I'm sorry, like an apology.
Yeah, we want that apology to come first,
right.
Or we want
the recognizing.
I forgive you to be taken in like a thank you, and I appreciate your forgiveness, but
or I'm sorry that I did that to you.
There's many times when the person will ultimately not care about your forgiveness if they're doing their own thing, or if you don't have a connection to them anymore, or something is so long in the past that it's something you just let go of for yourself, or you don't have contact with the person, they're not around, it's not available. There's still, I think that's why it's helpful, and it's kind of hopeful to acknowledge that forgiveness really is just you, and it's all about you, and it's for you, and that's okay. And it's
a practice, because you're gonna have to go through it probably over and over again.
Because different situations.
I've noticed in my life, when I was forgiving someone, that I would come back to feeling those same feelings again, even though I stated I forgave them, or I went through whatever I had to do to forgive them. And I think there are ways to forgive people. First of all, you have to recognize that that step has to say, you know what, I notice that I have resentment or frustration or anger or pain towards someone, and I think sometimes it's even towards a situation. Maybe it's not to that person or to a person. It could be to an experience. It could be to a culture. It could be towards a government. It could be towards, I mean, there's a lot of times we need to forgive. So there has to be this like realization that, okay, I have resentment, I have frustration, I have anger, but I can't harness that stuff, because if I harness that stuff, that's going to project outwards. I'm going to create more of that in my life. So I've got to notice that. So that's probably like step one in releasing that forgiveness. And then there's the process of forgiving, which I think comes up over and over again. And that's where you have to practice it, is when it comes up and you have to notice, oh wait, I said I was going to forgive this, or I wasn't going to let this happen anymore.
Or I thought I was over this, you know, and sometimes there's shame around forgiveness whenever we think maybe we've done it or we can't do it and it's hard and we feel like we're lacking in some way because of that. And then there's also shame around our mistakes and the things that we've done, and learning to forgive yourself. And that's a good place to practice, but it's honestly usually the most difficult thing to
Probably
do.
the one that we
and
all need to do.
You just do throughout your whole life,
Yeah.
because you're always with you, so you can't let
You're
go
always
of you.
making mistakes.
Like, I can't really stop talking to me, so I'm gonna have to forgive me for any mistakes I've made. And that's important too, because it in the same sense of whenever you hold something against somebody else, it affects you negatively. It keeps putting that out into your other relationships. It's the same thing when you hold things against yourself. You're creating this person that you don't want to be by constantly telling yourself reminders of your worst mistakes. Like, that's, and I think it's helpful to look at like that kind of parent-child love and unconditional thing that we feel or is associated with that dynamic of love and the level of forgiveness that we give our children whenever they make mistakes. All day, every day, like whatever their behaviors are, there's still a love. And even when my son is making mistakes over and over, the same things, we're working on the same things constantly, I never associate him, who he is, with the behavior. And I think there's an element of, we can apply that to ourselves and to those more difficult situations and kind of look at ourselves where I'm not identified by my mistake. I still see myself. I tell him whenever he gets in that whole, am I bad, you know, am I bad? No, you're a good boy who made a bad choice. And that's something to remind ourselves when we have a failure or we make a mistake and we need to forgive ourselves. I'm me, I'm a good person, I'm worthy of good things. I made a bad choice. I can learn from that choice and correct, and then release and let it go. But you know, there's that thing. We're not sitting in it.
So forgiveness is about having compassion and understanding for another person, but not necessarily meaning that, you know, in your son's case, I think that's growing, that's, you know, that's teaching, that's learning. But when we're dealing with adults, let's say, adults, I guess, that sometimes it's scary because it's like, oh, if I forgive them, then they're gonna walk all over me or something like that.
Okay, yeah.
So I think it's more about the forgiveness, especially in these bigger traumatic situations that we have from our past. That's like, okay, I've got to let this go to move on, to have a healthy relationship, to have romantic love, to have a good relationship with my parent or sister or brother, or to move on and be able to, you know, do, I don't know, this thing again that I did that I haven't forgiven myself about. So it's about progressing, but understanding like whatever was happening at that time or whatever that person was going through probably affected their behavior, or like you were saying, is not necessarily attached to that person's identity.
Of who they are.
Right. So I think that having understanding, having compassion is how we end up forgiving. Because if you're struggling with forgiveness and like you want to forgive, but you're looking at the situation and you're saying like, I can't, or I'm having a hard time, like how would you help someone in that situation, let's say?
I mean, I've been in that situation personally many times with different relationships where it's like very painful, whatever happened. Unfortunately, there's been history of like abuse and different things that I've had to forgive in different relationships. And sometimes there is that moment of when you see someone's in a pattern of repetitive behavior, you can want to withhold your forgiveness because you don't want to condone the pattern of behavior. But at the end of the day, all the pain that you feel associated with that, you still have to figure out a way to release it from yourself. And there's a really important thing to understand, the distinction between forgiveness and reconciliation, and forgiveness and accepting the behavior. There's such a thing as forgiving and letting go, and you release the person as well, or whatever. And a really good way to do that is trying to understand who they are, what they're going through, if there's addiction, if there's personal history for them of something that they've been through that has put them in this position where now they're behaving this way. And allowing yourself to see someone who's hurt you as just a human being and detach a little bit from the relationship you have with them can help you detach also from the pain that is there. And you kind of start to let it go, and you see them as a person who they've been through this thing and it's caused a behavior in them that they're struggling with. I can let them go. I can understand that they're in pain too. And, I can release that.
So one of I totally agree with that. That makes a lot of sense to me. One of the things that I've done in my life to work with forgiveness is it was given to me. I did like a personal growth sort of seminar, and the lady that held it was like a psychotherapist, and she had us do a meditation where we actually put ourselves in the shoes of our parents. So, and looked at their life and how they were raised and what they went through. But then we went so far as to go back into the lives of our grandparents and what they went through. So, and I think sometimes what we harbor runs deeper than just our own experiences, and we do have to look at the people's lives now and how they were raised. And most of the times when you do that, and what I learned, I guess, I don't know about everyone else, but what I learned in that situation was that everybody's kind of doing the best that they can with the cards that they're dealt, and not everybody's going to grow and change and be able to take the responsibility that they may have not taken at that time. And that's when we take that higher ground and say, okay, if I notice that, then I can release the frustrations that I have so that I can live a different life than that. And then for people that probably stay in the same behavioral patterns, you just have to recognize that. And it's not even, you don't have to push people out of your life. You just recognize it, and you don't let them in as close to where that stuff is going to pose a problem or a threat. And I think once we get to these certain places where we feel strong and confident and healed, and we're always working on that path, maybe even through the mistakes we're making on the daily, that those people can even be in our lives and they're not going to necessarily hurt us. The hurt comes from our triggers and our pain and our frustrations that we haven't let go of. So I know as we get there, it's less of an issue. But yeah, you might want to marry someone who's shows you the same behavior over and over and over again.
You make smart choices. Like, we've talked about boundaries before. We've talked about these things. They are important. We have compass, a moral compass, and we have things that tell us what we think is okay and not okay. And sometimes we have to let people go who are going to continue to repeat things that we don't think are okay, and you have to release that. And
and if we don't do that, we're kind of trying to change that person. And a lot of times that never works anymore. No, that just means like we want that person, we want them in a different way.
There's an element of acceptance of what you cannot control has to be. Like and you're only responsible for you. It's not about you. And a lot of times, even when we're hurt in really devastating ways directly by someone we care about, think about infidelity, think about abuse, think about addiction, these things that are really painful. And I've experienced them in a variety of relationships in a variety of ways, and it's trickled down through family, origins in a variety of ways. And, you have to understand that's not about you. If someone is living in that lifestyle, if they're violent or they're disturbed or they're broken or they're addicted or they're lying and they're trying to pursue things that damage the good things and healthy things in their life, that's about them, their void, their pain, their brokenness coming out in this way. And some of that helps to let go and not take things so personally and understand that that's part of their journey, their experience, and whatever they've been through. And in turn, looking into yourself and understanding that, like, sometimes when I have beef or I make a mistake or I hurt somebody, I don't usually end up looking at that person and just thinking it's all about my malice for this person that I made this mistake. No, it was something in me that I had a shortfall. I had a mistake. I had whatever issue caused me to do something that I needed forgiveness for. Whatever, it wasn't about them. It was, I'm responsible for my own stuff. And to apply that to the person on the opposite side of it and look at, it's not about me. It's not all about me. And that's a helpful way to look at it, is not to be so, even when someone does something that they know will hurt you, if they're doing it over and over again and they can't stop, that's about them.
Yeah.
Like, that's about them. And if you know, I'm sure there's a lot of different ways to look at it, but that's just, I feel like that's
Yeah, and I think on the other side of it,
a good way to just kind of let go of that association.
Yeah, and then the other side of that, because I do think I see us playing mirrors all the time. So a lot of times when I am having a hard time or I'm getting triggered with the person in front of me, it's something that I need to forgive in myself. So I think it works like both ways. So I do always look at myself. I do take responsibility for a lot of things. Because I think in the end, then I have the kind of power, like that's my power to be able to make these choices all the time. And then, so as soon as I give that power up to somebody else to be making my choices, and I feel like, oh, that person or this, or I blame them, or I'm pointing all these fingers. And
Do you ever notice that, like, in a lot of scenarios, actually, that offense and that thing that you feel like you need to issue forgiveness to someone because they wronged you, sometimes it's just like your issue, that you're overly attached to this thing.
Yeah.
You're overly attached to something. Like, if it triggers something deeper inside of yourself and the actual event is not that big of a deal, the person had no motive or intent behind it. Sometimes things just happen the way they happen and we all make little trip ups. But when we take them in so hard and you realize, like,
well, and it could be like,
it's my issue.
But it could be like an issue that it triggered from like deep before.
Way back when,
and you're like, oh, I was in love back then, and now I'm feeling not loved again, and like, boom, ouch, you're like, this hurts, and I don't like you, and you're rude, and I'm gonna forgive you later, like. But I think like then you get to look at yourself and say, okay, where do I need to make forgiveness for myself?
It could be exposure of things that you have not let go of. And sometimes even the hardest forgivenesses that we have to issue to people just really help expose stuff in ourselves that we have to heal. And that act of release and that act of forgiveness and kind of detaching the event from our identity, just we can heal those things that come up.
So that's like being the observer, and I think when we're forgiving ourselves, I think that's a good practice. Then you take it away from yourself. You look at it, I for myself, I don't know that this is for everyone when it comes up, but for myself, this helps because I find that I need to understand situations in order for me to really process them fully. And so maybe if I had something that I need to, like, I made a mistake in my life that put a burden on me, and made me feel lack of confidence or self-esteem, or didn't make me feel good enough or something like that. If I take this scenario and I separate it from myself, but then I try and understand why I might have done that. And so I look at it, but maybe I don't look at it while it's inside. Maybe I do what you're saying. And I still try to understand it, because once I seem to understand, I was going through this at that time, and I did feel this, and that's not an excuse for me to behave that way, but I now can say, okay, I have compassion for myself.
You could rise up a little bit at that point.
But I think it's so healthy to forgive yourself, because if you don't forgive yourself for the things that you've done and don't look at the things that you did, one, you'll probably repeat the pattern. No, you will repeat the
Because
pattern.
you're not examining and
Yep.
you're not changing.
And then you're going to be the people you don't want to be. And then two, you get defensive around anything that triggers that. And I'll notice it in myself, like, you know, someone will trigger that, I'll start to feel that, like, you know, that wanting to be,
yeah.
you know, like defensive and push back and like,
yeah.
and now I just know it all too well because I don't want to see it in other people, and now I'm like, oh, I'm being that way, and it's you know, it's hard to accept, but I think the more that I can accept it, and I just kind of, okay, I'm like, just let it go, you know, like, it's not, like, you don't have to do this, you know, like, it's, you got something icky in there, like, just clean it out, and, like, let's move on.
Don't put it on this person, they don't
Yeah.
need it too. Then you both have it.
And it's everywhere, it's like,
It's all over the place. It's like glitter. It spreads.
Glitter sounds a lot prettier
It's
than
bad,
what it is.
but okay, it's more like herpes then. What, can I not say that? It's not a bad word, it's real.
Yes, that's true. Another episode.
Anyway, where do we go from there? Where do we go from herpes?
I'm not sure, actually.
Straight to the doctor, folks. Protect yourselves. Be safe.
That's true, actually.
Forgiveness. I like what you were mentioning a little while ago about like how things trickle down from deeper roots, or up from deeper roots, or whatever.
The family tree.
They come from far beyond ourselves a lot of times. There's generations of people influencing the next generation and giving them another set of issues. But I feel like there's also those generations that break those and form a new pattern, and you're kind of like, not just for you, but for everybody else, have to accept that we are going through a lot more than what can be seen on the outside, and a lot of us are sometimes carrying things we're not even aware of.
I actually think we all are, by the way, and so
us.
yes, that means you're responsible to heal all of your past generations' traumas, so
No.
good luck. You're not alone.
It's as easy as letting go.
We're here doing it with you.
This is it. We're doing it right now.
But I think it's even more, because I was actually thinking about it earlier when we were brainstorming a little bit, is like that there's forgiveness on like cultural levels too, because there's like racial, you know, differences, and there's forgiveness from the real deep rooted icky stuff that our country has been through, and that our nation has been through, and that our world has been through. And I think there's a lot of forgiveness that actually, you know, it's going to be carried over. So there's stuff called, you know, like cultural trauma because of who we are. You know, I even think there's male to female, you know, trauma, depending on, you know, so there's like forgiveness there. Like, what is, how have men been, how have women been, you know, like where can they be forgiven?
Sides.
Yeah. So I think it's even bigger. So, I mean, obviously it starts on the individual level, and I think it does start with forgiving ourselves and forgiving our, the people closest to us that have hurt us, because that always seems like the hardest. And then it does trickle outward.
Yeah.
It would be nice if we can forgive all of the situations of the past and our history, because I think that's what peace is about in the end.
It's not, I mean, it's by no means always easy, and some people just don't want to do it, and that's okay too. And you know, sometimes forgiving people who you're never going to talk to again is a much different process than forgiving the people that you see every day and you want to keep seeing every day. I mean, it's just a matter of awareness, compassion, patience with yourself, with
What you can handle at the
what you
time.
can take on, and just.
Sometimes maybe you're not ready to forgive someone. I think that's okay too.
But I think an awareness of that is important. Just be
One day I'm going to
self-aware.
forgive them,
Be
but right now I'm not
self-aware.
ready.
Yeah, it's not like I haven't had those instances where I'm like, no, I'm still upset about that.
Yeah,
like, I guess
it's not
I'm
time.
not over it yet. Like, okay, not today. So, it's a work in progress, and you just shape and reshape, and it's a lot of release. And I think sometimes we get wrapped up in justice and we forget about mercy. And an element of mercy can be really beautiful thing in a person, and it changes everything around you when you don't always want to repay with what was given. You know what I mean? I believe in karmic stuff to a point, because you should put out good things, and that helps encourage, more good things to attract to you. But at the same time, I don't believe in that from a vengeful place of you should get paid back exactly what was wrong to you. I actually have more of an interest in, like, let's help you with whatever puts you in that place to do that.
Oh, me too, yeah.
Extend mercy, the arm of mercy that I would want and I would need. And some people, I mean, I'm not, like, let's not go crazy in the extreme. There's people in, like, prison who don't want to change, and they want to, like, harm people, and that's just what they want to do because they have whatever issue with themselves. But in reality, this is something we can practice. It's not that crazy to think that you can look at someone who hurt you and say, I'm hurt by what you did, but I see where you're hurting, and I'm gonna separate myself from all of this pain and let it go and try to heal and release.
Yeah, I think it made me think of how I always felt like we oftentimes will focus on, like, people that, I mean, absolutely should focus on people that have been abused, but we sometimes forget about the abusers too. And I think we're getting better about it. Now it's easier to talk about. I think before it was, like, kind of taboo. We're not going to give the attention to the abuser, but I do think that that person probably needs more help than anybody, a lot of times. So we do need to start to extend that forgiveness. So maybe even our systems and things like that will start to reform to create more awareness surrounding why people do the things that they do, so that they can work to support better humans that maybe don't do those things. So, yeah. That's forgiveness. We just all do that, the world will be a better place, and, like, things will be really good and easy. So.
Yeah. And forgive the people even when they don't want to get better or be better, and that's for you.
Yeah, just
for you,
don't.
for the world.
Don't invite them ever for dinner every night or something. All right. Well, it was wonderful as always. I'm Sheena Dressel.
And I'm Lauren Garrison.
And we are MindFeelz. Don't forget to like us on social media. Please subscribe. We only have 11 subscribers. It would be really nice to have 12 this week.
Someday we'll look at this and we'll be like, wow, but
I'm going to post this one
a week. Please, at least, people. Click I don't know where it is on the screen, but
click it,
boop,
wherever it is.
Anyway, we're on Facebook and Instagram, and you can email us.
Yeah, email us topics, because next week we're doing Taboo Talks, which is where we have people write in, have people.
No one's written subscribers will write in topic choices that we do not
but
look
make
at
sure you
until we're on spot.
Make sure you put Taboo Talks at the top, so that we don't look at it. We have someone else open it for us.
Yes, please, in the subject or...
be creative. We'll talk about it. All right, bye.